Welcome to In the News for October the 21st, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. iSpy new iPads. Wow, what a little bit of a surprise this week. You already wrote about it. You had a great post about it already, and several other people wrote about it as well, but maybe not in the most flattering of ways.
It's not that they're bad. It's just that it's a little confusing, some of the decisions.
That's a good way to put it.
Perfect example. We knew that Apple was going to be announcing new iPads in October, and sure enough that they did. But I think the epitome of the confusion is the new low-end iPad. So the one that you would think would be the least business-oriented, just because it's the cheapest one. Although that's not true, because a lot of people can use it. I want to come back to that in a second. But it has this fantastic new feature of putting the camera right on the long side, so that when your iPad is the way that everybody always has their iPad, and you're doing a video conference, you're looking straight at the person. Because right now, with the camera on the side, when you're talking to someone on the iPad, you look like you're looking to the side, and it's very obnoxious.
Or I'll even just quickly say, many times I'm holding the iPad with both hands, Jeff, and I'm typically covering the camera. Okay, good. Okay,
it's a problem. So of course, a feature like that, especially in this day and age, so many people are using video conferencing, even as we're sort of moving somewhat out of the pandemic, the video conferencing remaining. What a perfect time to add that to the iPad Pro. No, Apple didn't do that. Nope.
Okay.
The low end one, sure. So there's just like all these curiosities, but putting aside the drama, which does make for interesting, titles for your articles and stuff like that. I will say this: the new low-end iPad, the 10th generation, the Gen 10, it's really a nice iPad. I will tell you, just this week, I was talking with one of my partners. Typically I tell attorneys that if you want to really get all the features, get that iPad Pro. And if you want, otherwise, if you want sort of the middle of the road, the best overall option, go for one of the middle options, which is
not bad,
the iPad Air. But this new iPad, it's actually got a lot going for it. I have a big personal bias because I'm such a big fan of the iPad stylus. And I love the second generation one that has the flat side, that fits right on
Apple
top.
Pencil.
And you only get that with the iPad Pro or the iPad Air. You don't get that with this low end, just regular iPad. But I was talking to one of my partners, and he's ready to get a new iPad. And I think he has a stylus. He just doesn't really use it. And again, I really think, especially attorneys and certain types of users, can get a lot of value out of the stylus. But let's put that to the side. If you already know that the stylus is not that important to you, well, then I got to tell you, this iPad's pretty good. I mean, it's reasonably fast. It's not the fastest, but it's reasonably fast. It does have the flat side, so that which makes it, I think, a little bit easier to hold. It no longer has the Touch ID button, which means you get more screen devoted to, most of the front of it is devoted to the screen. It ticks a lot of the box. Plus, it has this new keyboard that Apple came out with, which is a different style of keyboard, but it looks like a pretty nice keyboard. There's a lot to like about this new iPad. There have been times over the past 10 years where I have thought that the lowest end iPad appeals to professional users, but most of the time I don't think it's right for them. Most of the time I think it's more for education. But I think that right now we're in a cycle where this is a pretty good iPad.
Now, to be fair, this lower end, I hate to say it that way, I don't know how to say it, just the regular iPad, the lower end iPad does still work with an Apple Pencil.
Sure.
It's just the first generation Apple Pencil.
It's the original Apple Pencil, which means you can't have it sitting there all the time charging. And to make things even more bizarre, because you have to use dongles now, because the new iPad uses USB-C, the Apple Pencil uses Lightning, so you have to use this awkward USB-C to Lightning dongle, which comes with new Apple Pencils. But if you have an old Apple Pencil, you need to pay like $9 or $12 or whatever it is for it. So it's just a little silly. But again,
I thought that was weird. If a
stylus is not very important to the way that you use your iPad.
That's right.
Well, then I'll tell you what, everything else about this iPad is really not bad, because the screen's not quite as good as the higher end ones, but it's still a nice screen, and it's a bigger screen now. And the price is right. In fact, with the money that you save by getting this versus the iPad Air, you could put that towards the brand new keyboard that Apple just came out with, which looks like a pretty nice keyboard.
Yeah. This is called the Magic Keyboard Folio, which I think either somebody here in this story, or maybe this was another story. Here it is. Random aside. Apple now makes a smart cover a smart keyboard, a smart keyboard folio, a smart folio, a magic keyboard, and a magic keyboard folio now.
That's pretty funny.
6 different keyboards that you could get. Although, to be fair, I do like this new keyboard. Even though, to me, as soon as I see this little kickstand version, this is in this new keyboard here, it looks like a Windows Surface or a Microsoft Surface, right? Because that has historically always been a kickstand that you find typically on Microsoft Surface platforms.
But there's some logic to it, because although the kickstands don't work great if you actually want to put the iPad on your lap. But I've never done that. I usually put it on a desktop. You know, with the kickstand, and this is the first time that Apple's offered a kickstand as part of one of these case type things, that it allows you to have different angles, and you can have the keyboard in front of it. But if you don't want the keyboard because it just sort of magnetically attaches, you just rip it off, and then you could just have just use the back part of it for a stand. And that's actually been one of my complaints about the Magic, whatever the title of it is, the one that goes with the high-end iPad.
The
Pros,
other one,
the Magic
one of the
keyboard,
other ones, Magic
is that
keyboard,
it's all one device. And I do like using a keyboard with my iPad, but I don't use it all the time. And it's too much extra weight and everything else to have it as a part of my iPad Pro all the time. So that's the reason that I decided against getting that external keyboard. So they're interesting options. So suffice it to say, the new entry-level iPad 10th generation is a really good device that if you're looking for an iPad, you should consider. And on the other hand, if you're looking for the high-end iPad with all the bells and whistles and stuff like that, the iPad Pro, this new one it's just a minor spec bump. I mean, it's a little bit faster. And it's got this hover feature that I want to come back to in a second. But, you know, it's not something that I would rush out to. I certainly wouldn't rush out to upgrade from a new iPad Pro.
Right.
But if you have an older unit that's, you know, many years older, or maybe you've never used an iPad Pro before and you were just waiting for an excuse to make the jump, this is one.
So like you said, go ahead
first, and I'm going to come back around the hover feature. Go ahead.
It seems like you did a good job again of covering this in your post, and it was echoed by several other Jason called it the erratic odyssey of iPads. Somebody said this was weird choices that Apple is making. But for the iPad Pro, it is just a minor speed bump. I think both of us have the 2021 iPad Pro 12.9, which has the M1 processor in it, right? Well, this year you can get the M2 processor, so it is faster. I think you did a good job of pointing out that this would be probably something that maybe professional videographers or photographers would enjoy, because it really does put some speed bumps in there from the processing side and from the video side on there. But I don't know if that alone would be enough to say, well, I need to upgrade. I think my M1, I think you said the same thing, is plenty fast for the vast majority of things that I do. I don't feel the need to upgrade. And then this Apple Pencil feature here, I don't know if that would be enough to push me over either, Jeff.
Yeah. And again, that's the wrong question to ask. This is not even aimed at people that have a recent iPad. This is, this is for people. If you're upgrading it, you would be upgrading because you have a much like a 5-year-old iPad or something even older than that. And then all of the different features that have been coming out with new models over the years, you can get them all in this new package, plus a tiny bit more too with the M2. So it's not really, I think, a relevant question to ask if it's worth upgrading from last year's iPad. The hover feature is interesting because the hover feature means that you can take your pencil, and before you actually touch the screen, just as you're hovering over the screen, the iPad can see that you're hovering and have things happen. And it's something that we're all familiar with when we use a mouse. You know, when you use your mouse, you move the mouse and your cursor hovers across things.
That's a good point, right?
Not until you click does it actually interact. But as your mouse is hovering, for example, one of the cool things with the iPad now is when your mouse is hovering over different items, the size of the little cursor can change depending upon what you're about to click. And so Apple's now bringing that same, you know, very thoughtful technology over to the pencil. And they have some neat things too. Like one of the coolest ones I saw was in the new Procreate app. As you're about to write with your pencil, as your tip gets close, you can see on the screen how big the ink is going to be. Like, is it a big, big brusher? And with your other hand, you can pinch and zoom. And so you can actually pinch and zoom to adjust the tip size using your hand with your left hand as you're writing with your right hand. So, you know, for artists and stuff, I can see tons of uses of this being a cool technology. It's interesting. Like, I wonder how much of this, clearly the hardware is involved here, right? But do you really need to have the I mean, is this something that they could have brought to the earlier models? I don't know. And one of the reasons I wonder about it, I don't have iPad OS 16.1 yet. I'm not running the beta, but it comes out on Monday. But if you look deep into the notes on iPad OS 16.1, one of the accessibility features is called hover text. And just before we started recording today, Brett, I was trying to look at what but I actually think that it may use some of the same hover technology, but may not require the new iPad Pro. I don't know. I don't want to start a conspiracy. Right. I'm going to circle back next week on this one to see what is that hover text all about.
We'll table that for now.
Anyway, does it really require the new hardware, or is Apple just promoting it with the new thing? Anyway, it's a cool feature. You know, I like hover, and whenever I get my next iPad Pro, whether it's 1 to 10 years from now, whenever it is, I'm sure I will love having that hover feature with everything else. But it's really the one new breakout feature, that and the speed. And so if you really need the fastest possible iPad Pro, then now you have it. It's just going to be a little bit faster in some stuff. But for most folks, this is just a speed bump. So it's nice to have, though. If you were in the market and you hate to buy an iPad, if I was going to buy an iPad yesterday, you hate to buy last year's model, right? But now you can be comfortable that you're buying the newest and the greatest, and that's something that's going to have a longer lasting power.
It's just interesting, like all the people that we typically follow. I think I already mentioned Jason Snell said that if the growth of the iPad is a journey, today shows that it's still an erratic one. At least it's moving forward. I like MacStories. This lineup is super weird, a little bit awkward. And I liked on 9 to 5 Mac, iPad Palooza. Weird choices Apple is making for its new iPads. Just really a little curious. I think a lot of us, we were hoping that maybe Apple would have had, some kind of an event, even a virtual event, if nothing else, and maybe some additional announcements. But I guess we'll take it, right? We don't really have much of a choice, but I love that your angle there, especially with the hover side. Like, who knows where that could come into a little bit more play, and that could be cool. Let's move to the iPhone from the iPad now, and something that is could be quite an embarrassment if you're using your iPhone. Has this ever happened to you? Sounds like not to you very much, Jeff, but I find this to be something, maybe every couple of weeks or so, all of a sudden I look down and I've got a big white bright light flashing from my rear end butt pocket. Exactly. And I look down and it turns out somehow my iPhone's flashlight got enabled, and I am just like walking around with a big light, flashing from my butt. I like the story you posted today.
I also like the cover picture of it, like that old
Bruce
Springsteen album cover. It's nice that you can trigger the flashlight so easily from the lock screen.
That is true.
Obviously, it means that you can, much like every once in a while, you could accidentally butt dial somebody. You can accidentally butt light yourself by, however one does it, that you accidentally press that button without realizing. And I've had it happen before. I usually don't put mine in my back pocket. I usually, put it in my shirt pocket or my pants pocket. But I have absolutely looked down and seen that my shorts are aglow because the flashlight's in there. Like, how did that happen? So anyway, it's a cute article that Heather Kelly for the Washington Post wrote about there's different things that you can do to make it a little bit to slow down the mechanism for turning on the flashlight in various different ways. And of course, some of these makes it harder to use the flashlight if you actually intend to use it. But if you have had these problems in the past, you can do a couple of the tips that they suggest to make it happen less frequently. But what made me laugh about this article is when I saw it, it's one of these things in life that you're like, oh, that doesn't just happen to me. This is actually happening to other people too. Oh yeah, we can all sort of laugh about it. So
enough that the Washington Post had to write about it. Exactly. And some of these are really neat. Like one of her first options is make it harder to press. You go to a settings, accessibility, touch, and haptic touch. And in fact, I'll just share quickly. I remember my father suffered from Parkinson's, so his hands would shake quite a bit. And I remember going into the accessibility options, which again was just pretty cool that even some of that existed. And it would slow down so that he could it made it a little bit easier for him to actually touch or engage something.
Good idea.
Not that he needed the flashlight all the time, but the other thing was disable tap to wake, which I don't want to do that, right? I like the tap to wake. Disable raise to wake. I like that. The only thing about some of these options here is I don't want to change them off there. Then the last one, I think the last two, it's like make sure you just grip the phone by the sides at all times. Okay, I'll do my best. Or get a Folio iPhone case, one that has like the case that covers up the screen.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, that's a good physical fix, I guess, if you can't find anything else. Now on to watch faces. I liked this story because speaking of things that you think, hey, I'm not the only one. I get so overwhelmed when I want to customize a watch face, Jeff. I mean, first of all, there's so many of them. And then second of all, I find that I freeze because I'm sitting there, I'm in the custom mode. And then I'm like, what do I want in the upper corner? What do I want in the middle? Like, I don't, there's so many options to customize. I like that there are all of the customizable options on there with even the colors and the complications and everything. But I got to tell you, I find myself, I go in, okay, now I'm going to fix this and I'm going to organize my watch faces. And I just start to freeze. There's so much in there. And this was a great story you linked to today in 9 to 5 Mac, the problem with Apple Watch faces.
Yeah, I mean, complications mean something in an Apple Watch world, but
right.
It can be complicated to set up the watch faces. It can be frustrating when there's not the one watch face that you really want. One of the things that we didn't have it on the slate to talk about this week, but earlier this week I reviewed the one. I guess maybe we talked about it last week, and that's what it was. We talked about it last week's show that the 1Password app for the Apple Watch is now available.
Very good.
It works well, but one of the things I pointed out in my article on that is that there's not a lot of third-party Apple Watch apps that are really all that useful. Doesn't mean the Apple Watch isn't great. I love the Apple Watch, but it's mostly because of the built-in features. And one of those key built-in features is the watch face. And I'm frustrated by, as good as some of Apple Watch faces are, I really wish we had more options with third parties. And I realize they can be complicated to set up all the different options. And I know that Apple wants to make it that middle road of not being too complicated, not being too simple, but again, because the watch face is so important for the Apple Watch, I really wish that Apple was doing even more to just to allow us to set things up. But again, on the flip side of it is that they do have some cool watch faces now, like the new Wayfinder that you're showing, which comes with the Apple Watch Ultra, looks really cool. So Apple Watch faces are just it's a tough issue.
Well, I think the other thing I would say, because again, I don't want to complain about all of the options there, right? I am very grateful that we have so many customization options. I think the problem is with me. It's not you, Apple, it's me. In the sense that, like, even this Wayfinder, we've talked about it many times. I love this watch face, but I feel like I'm never done. Like I'm always like testing something out, or okay, maybe I'll try this complication in this corner, or maybe just the other day I changed the color for like the middle band in there, and I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool. And I guess on one hand, that's really neat that I can switch back and forth and change it up. On the other hand, I'm like, am I ever going to be done? Like, am I ever going to find the watch face? Anyway, part of it is fun. I can see both ways on this, but it was just good that you linked to this.
Something to think about.
Yeah, and another good thing that you linked to, although I think I'm going to pass on this. You found a story where apparently this is a jeweler in Arizona, that if you have the titanium Apple Watch Ultra, which I love, you can actually send it to him and get it covered in stainless steel.
Well, it's not covered in stainless steel, but it's just he's polished the titanium.
He's polished it. Okay.
It doesn't mean the titanium comes with a matte finish, but there's nothing inherent about that. You could also have titanium with a polished finish, and that's exactly what he's done. The little video you're showing there.
Wow.
I personally
that actually looks pretty cool, but
see, I think it looks pretty good, but one thing is because he polished it, he took off the orange paint on the action button on the side there.
Yeah.
I don't know. You could see an argument, but it's just a clever idea. It never even occurred to me that it would be possible to do this. And so just from the standpoint of, how fascinating that somebody thought of doing this and did it pretty well. So if you want to have it done yourself, you could send them your Apple Watch, or you can actually buy an Apple Watch Ultra from them for $1,500, which is almost twice the regular price, and they'll sell it to you a version that's all polished up. So you will definitely stand out. Okay, and you'll have a different watch.
You'll be different.
You'll be different.
You'll win. You'll be the winner. You'll have the coolest Apple Watch Ultra ever on this. Speaking of the Apple Watch, quickly before you move off, another great article you linked to was in MacRumors with several of the features in watchOS 9 that you may not be taking advantage of. This was great.
Yeah, there's some nice ones in there. I mean, just pick one, for example, is that if you use the Apple Workouts app, whether you're doing Apple Fitness, you've got it on the screen right there, is that it used to be you could sort of change the numbers, but what you couldn't do is easily see your activity rings. And, sometimes you want to have a sense of, I want to make sure I don't want to stop. I don't want to get off this treadmill until I've closed all my green circles. I'm here in the first place. Right. And so I like that you can now set it. And that's how I have it on mine. I have it set that my second screen, I just swipe up, and it's the one that you're showing on the right side of the screen here, where you can see your activity circles. Right. And so, let's just make sure that you've got all your red, you've done your red circle, you've done your green circle before you stop your exercise. So if that's important to you, I just like that extra customization. There's lots of little watchOS 9 features like that are really cool. And some of them, like the other ones in here, like, following podcasts and adding calendar entries are so technical that I'm not sure I'd ever want to do them with my Apple Watch. But there's someone out there that's like, oh yeah, that's exactly the feature I needed. So that's great. Lots of cool little features.
That's good. Good story on there. You mentioned this already. 16.1 point very soon. It's coming. We've talked about 16.1 a little bit because some of the features I remember that were announced back in the summer at WWDC did not come out in iOS 16. Mm-hmm. And iOS 16.1 has been very much anticipated by many of us. And finally, we got confirmation that it will be, is this Monday, October 24th, that it's coming out.
Right. So we're going to have new operating systems on Monday for the iPhone, for the iPad. I think for the TV, might be doing some changes. I think everything's getting changes. The Mac OS is getting changes. We're going to get all sorts of updates next week. On the iPhone, for example, we're going to be getting the new iCloud shared photo library, which you and I have talked about. So you can share things with other family members. That's coming out. There's going to be support for Matter in the Home app, if that's important to you. You're going to be able to use Apple Fitness Plus even without an Apple Watch.
Without an
iPhone. Just on your iPhone. Yeah. So, which makes sense for a lot of the workouts, because although the Apple Watch adds a lot of nice extras to working out, you don't necessarily need it. So there's all these little bitty features. But as you say, Brett, what it really is in some ways is some of the things we learned about last summer that they just weren't quite ready for the 16.0 release. Right. So Apple said, give us a little bit more time and we'll get them in 16.1. So that's the iOS 16.1. And then on the iPad, we haven't had 16 yet for the iPad. So that's going to come out for the first time on Monday, and iPad OS 16.1. And it's got some other features too, including, for example, the cool Stage Manager feature, which, some people think is working well. Some people think it's still a little half-baked, but at least we'll all get it. So we can start to try to use it. And then all the other features. For example, one of the things that it's a cool little feature in iOS 16 is that you can select an object from a picture and, just pull that object out and paste it somewhere. But as much fun as that can be on the iPhone, what I really want to have it is on the iPad, because that's where I have my bigger screen. You can see pictures bigger. So I'm looking forward to playing with that. So it'll be nice next week to have all the new features from the OS updates.
Right. And we've talked about this before. I think one other time maybe Apple has released the update for the iPhone, iOS, whatever it was, but they waited a little bit for the update to happen for the iPad. And I know you and I have talked about this. We're such big fans of the iPad anyway. And a lot of these things, when the beta started coming out and people were messing with, like you said, the Stage Manager, number one is the one that I know most people were kind of, up in arms about. They're like, hey, this is not working the great. Apple just decided, hey, we're gonna bake it a little bit longer and make sure that we're comfortable with it before we actually release it. So we've been working now, I feel like for a couple of months or so, to where my iPhone is 16, but my iPad is still 15.4 or whatever it is. And that it's like, hey, I want some of those features. I can't remember exactly what it was. There was a couple of things, not so much the photos. I can't remember what it was, but I remember on the iPad, I go back to it and I'm like, oh, I'm not able to do that quite. Like that feature isn't on the iPad yet. Right. So I'm very much excited, looking forward to Monday. And I feel like, though, I'm still even a little bit hesitant. Like even on Monday we'll get iPad OS 16, but I don't know, just watching all of the beta and the issues going over the last couple of months, I'm like, is it going to be good enough, or should we wait for iPadOS 16.1? Like, I don't know, but we'll just have to.
Well, this will be 16.1 on Monday, but maybe wait for 16.2 is the question, right?
Right, exactly. And most importantly, if you've been waiting for this, I think my daughter has, on October 24th, you linked to it as well. And so thank you very much. My daughter was very happy. Apple Fitness Plus will now actually come with workouts featuring Tay-Tay herself, Taylor Swift. Will be there. My daughter has already been listening to, I don't know how, wherever she's like pulling this album from on there, which is great. Okay, so then quickly, last story. I'll pull it up here in just a moment. If you happen to have need a retirement plan, and just by the way, you actually have an unopened iPhone original, you're set. I think you're good. This is a fun story. This $600 iPhone just sold for nearly $40,000.
The original iPhone, which came out,
and it's still wrapped.
Yeah, still shrink wrapped in its original box, which I guess is why it's worth so much, from 2007. Did you buy that first iPhone, Brett?
I'm trying to remember. I think I did. I either had that very first one, Jeff, or I had the very next one. I have to go back and look at my model number. I cannot remember, which is embarrassing in a way.
I didn't get the original. I don't know if
I had the original. Yeah,
I never had the first one, mainly because it did not work with Microsoft Exchange email, so I know it couldn't use it with my work email. And it was the next year that they came out with the iPhone 3G, which did work with and that's also when apps came out and everything else. I feel like it was the second.
That was my first as well.
Yeah, it was the second generation iPhone which really started to become popular, but it was the first generation iPhone which shook up the industry because it was such a huge change from the way that everything had been done before. And some other manufacturers made fun of the iPhone. They're like, oh, there's no way this is going to work. And of course, it took over the market.
Yeah,
so
I remember.
If I could have a time machine and go back and buy one of those, just to sort of maybe buy a couple of them, actually, at $40,000,
and leave it unopened.
Exactly. Well, see, that's the problem. What is the chance that I could have left that unopened for that many years? Never.
No,
it was impossible. Even if you told me in 2007, hey Jeff, this is going to be worth $40,000, I would have taken that shrink wrap off. I would not have had that.
Absolutely. No hesitation. No hesitation on that. Excellent. All right. Well, let's go to our In the Know. Hopefully I'm going to be able to bring up this link here. As many people know, because we've been talking about it almost nonstop, I recently got an Apple Watch Ultra. Now, I have never had an Apple Watch that had the cellular capability, or maybe if I had one, maybe I had one, but I never turned it on. Right. So I feel like some of my In the Know tips, Jeff, are just me trying to catch up to you, because I know you've done this for a long time. But I had the Apple Watch Ultra, and it took me a while before I said, you know what, maybe I will simply add this to my cellular plan. Now, we've talked about this idea that you can add it. Now, it all depends on your carrier. I'm discovering on this, right? I happen to be AT&T. I know that you are. If you want to add your Apple Watch to your plan, for me on AT&T, it's an extra $10 a month. And I said, okay, well, I think I can have that. And by the way, sometimes they charge you an activation fee, but I'll just quickly say, if you've been a long-time customer, whoever you're working with, you might want to call and just, see if they can waive that or so. I think mine got waived when I added it. Anyway, you have to have the Apple Watch paired with your iPhone, obviously, to activate the Apple Watch right off the bat, right? And then it's a really nifty wizard that I walked through in my iPhone, in my Watch app, that I just said, turn on cellular, right? And so then it walks you through. You have to go in and it connects directly with your plan. You have to log into your plan. So I had to log in through AT&T. And I'd say maybe within about 5 minutes or so, everything was activated, because it's already built in there. Now, I'm trying to learn a little bit more about how this, because I'm getting to my point in just a moment here, that there is an eSIM card apparently that's built into the Apple Watch, right? And so that's how it works. But once I started it, I got an email from AT&T that said, hey, congratulations, you're activated, and here's your phone number for your watch. So I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, okay, does my Apple Watch have a separate phone number than my iPhone? And
yes
the answer is
no.
yes, exactly, exactly. Okay, Jeff, that's where I'm going. So this is more of just like an informational thing, I guess, more of a tip. But I knew that I'm actually in San Francisco this week, and I wanted to use my Apple Watch on its own without carrying my iPhone with me. So that's what prompted all of this. And I wanted to be able to make phone calls or receive text messages, and frankly, even stream music while I'm out jogging.
Right.
So I did get a separate phone number. So yes, you do get a separate phone number for the Apple Watch, but apparently that's only for billing purposes more than anything else, right? It's just a way for your carrier to kind of track, like, okay, here's your Apple Watch and here's the phone number that we've kind of associated with it. So as soon as I got that email though, Jeff, I texted my wife and I'm like, hey, call this phone number. I want to see if it works. And she did, and apparently it goes straight to voicemail or something like that, because it's not set up in that same way. So then I'm like, okay, never mind. I got to figure this out. Well, yesterday I did go out just with my cellular activated Apple Watch. I left my iPhone in the hotel room, and my wife called me out of the blue. And funny enough, I didn't even think about it. I just picked up the phone. I had my AirPods in. I picked up the call on my Apple Watch, and I just started talking with her. And she's like, "Are you talking on your phone? You sound great." And I'm like, "Well, actually, I'm doing the Dick Tracy. I'm talking to you on my Apple Watch." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. Did you call the Apple Watch phone number, or did you call my iPhone?" She's like, "I don't even know. I don't even remember what the phone number was for your Apple Watch." She called my iPhone number, and it immediately switched to that. So I got to tell you, I've tried to find a little bit more information about this, Jeff, on how it works. And the best that I can find, maybe you can enlighten me a little bit too, is that depending on your carrier, all the carriers call it a little bit different. In AT&T, they call it number sync. So basically, you add your Apple Watch, cellular Apple Watch, you do get a separate phone number, but you can just kind of ignore that because you're syncing your Apple Watch with your iPhone phone number. Even if your iPhone is, 2 miles away, then the watch will pick up a phone call that has been sent to your iPhone. I just thought that was brilliant. And again, I know I'm behind the times, and you've been doing this, and a lot of other people have, but that was fairly brilliant in my mind. Now, the only thing I was testing is I tried to text somebody directly from my Apple Watch while I was out. The names and everything synced up. And I think they replied to me, and I got to tell you, I didn't get it on my Apple Watch. I got to test this out a little bit. But when I got back to my when I got back to my hotel room, I saw a reply on my iPhone. So that's my only thing that I'm confusing about. If you're on AT&T, as I mentioned, they call this number sync, and basically this works if you have an Alexa here, or even if you have what I think for Android, if you have an Android device or a tablet or so. And then here's a separate FAQ for Apple Watch. If you're on Verizon, I think they call it number share instead of number sync. So again, just check with your cellular carrier. Obviously, it's very easy to add it if you have a cellular watch. Obviously, it's a little bit of an expense, to do that, to buy a cellular enabled watch and then to add it to your account. But I'm not looking back. Like, just the experience yesterday of taking a phone call from there. And I know that I have called her from my Apple Watch as well, and that worked great. I feel like, okay, I want to try the maps worked wonderfully. The streaming music on Spotify and Apple Music worked wonderfully. Like, just to have that additional confidence, right? You said this before, Jeff, just to have that additional confidence that if you needed to call somebody or receive a call and you didn't have your iPhone on you, then it works. So anyway, it was enlightening and enjoyable.
Yeah.
On there.
I'm sorry that you had the issue with the messages. And I know that sometimes I have issues where a message shows up on my iPhone, but not my iPad. Makes zero sense.
Yeah.
But, every once in a while that does happen. But having cellular on an Apple Watch, it's not something I use a lot. And I will even admit that there are months I don't use it at all. And it's like, well, I paid $10 that month. I never used it. But sometimes I do. The perfect example is when you're out, exercising, if you just didn't want to carry anything with you as you're sort of jogging. Right. I've also had situations where I was working in my backyard. I didn't have my iPhone with me, but I did have the Apple Watch on. And, my dad calls and I can, very quickly, even I might not even have my AirPods in. I could just talk. Then you really feel like Dick Tracy, just talk on the Apple Watch, and it sounds decent enough that you can have a quick conversation, which is nice.
Right.
So
Right.
it's a nice little it's not a neat, for most people, it's not a necessary thing, but is a nice plus thing. And the reason I think your tip is worthwhile sharing is you almost forget about the fact that there is technically a separate number associated with the Apple Watch, because as far as you're concerned, it's the same as your regular iPhone number.
Same thing, right?
But every once in a while, like for example, you may look at your bill and I may see, okay, Jeff Richardson, there's my cell phone number. And then like this says other number in the bill. And for a second, you're like, whoa, is somebody else putting their phone on my bill? No. That's just the extra number associated with your Apple Watch. But because it comes up so infrequently, sometimes when you see it, you forget for a second, where is that even coming from? But that's how it works. So.
And just quickly to round this out, one of the features in watchOS 9, it does allow me, like I can quickly turn off or on the cellular capability on the Apple Watch, because I can imagine it could, drain the battery. And it does have little dots to show you the strength of the signal, if you're out and about. So anyway, I'm obviously jumping into this, where other people have been going for a long time since Apple Watch. Series 3, I think, was the first cellular enabled Apple Watch, right? If I'm not mistaken, maybe a little bit more, but I've just never done it. And I don't feel like I missed out on a whole lot, but I certainly am not going to go back. Like, it's just great to have those options there.
Every once in a while, it'll become really useful. And then like afterwards, you're like, wow, I'm so happy I had that feature. So
exactly.
It's a nice little extra thing. My little tip, also Apple Watch related, this was something that was enabled in watchOS 9, which I like. One of the features I use on my Apple Watch all the time are timers. It's always right there on your wrist. And so it's just an easy way to do a quick timer. And one of the new things in watchOS 9 is you can designate a timer as a favorite timer. So for example, I often make iced tea in our house where, you boil some water and we have a little thing you can pour the boiled water in and whatever, mix them. And it always just takes 5 minutes to do it. And then you want to take the bags out so that, that's at its perfect freshness. And so I just need a quick little 5-minute timer. And if I'm by myself in the kitchen, I will just talk to my Apple Watch and I will just, say, hey, please set up a 5-minute timer. But if there's other people around me, I might just do it just by tapping my watch. And when I do that, because the 5-minute timer is the one that I use, most often, it's nice that you can just take that. And once you've done it once, if you just swipe, it's either from left to right or right to left, I forget which it is, but you swipe one way or the other and you'll see a little option to add it to favorites. And once you do that, whenever you open up the timer app on your watch in the future, the very first thing you will see is your favorites. So if there's specific times that you happen to often have a 7-minute timer, or you often have a whatever, they'll just be right there at the top, which makes it all the faster to use. And again, you don't need to do it that way. You can always use Siri, but if you are interacting with your screen to set the timer, why not make it just that much faster? So you set it up once and then it's there forever. And it's a cool little feature. So I'm glad that Apple added that feature to watchOS 9.
It's so good. So good. I use the timer so often that I have to have it as a complication on my face. Like that, I know how my watch faces. But exactly to your point, Jeff, the timers that are built in have like 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute. And then you can go down and set a custom timer, because many times I need 8 minutes, like something that I'm cooking or something like that. I need 8 minutes. And I'm like, I don't want to like go all the way down, go to the custom. And it's easy to do, but you have to like swipe up to find the 8 and everything. This is brilliant. I mean, that's just so cool that you could set that as a favorite. Thank you for sharing that, because I'm definitely going to be doing that. And I use the timer so much, by the way, that just another quick one, multiple timers. Like we used to not be able to set multiple timers on this. And so I know it sounds so silly that like, why are we paying this much to have a watch that is basically a timer for us? But having this capability, it's probably one of the things that I use the most on my Apple Watch. But I am so thrilled that they have a favorite. And that's in watchOS 9, right? That's something that's kind of brand new. That is good stuff. All right. Excellent. Wow. Lots of good stuff. New iPads. Maybe some good iPads on there. I'm sure we'll be talking about this a little bit more as we go through. But thanks for joining me today, Jeff. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.